What up, though, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Downtown Deuce Show. So, guys, free agency is in full swing. We're about 2.5 hours from the making of this video of free agency starting. And we are going to dive into what the Pistons have done so far and also what has happened around the league that may have impacted what the Pistons may have wanted to do, right? But it's been very, very busy. As soon as 6 p.m. hit today, you saw a lot of activity, as we're used to seeing this time this year, right? So let's go ahead and get into the moves that the Pistons made. So the first move the Pistons made was bringing back Paul Reed, right? Paul Reed is a forward center for the Detroit Pistons. He played last season. I think he made about $1.5 million a year. But here is the official news here from Shams Charania. Says center forward Paul Reed has agreed to a 2-year deal, $11 million deal to return to the Detroit Pistons. And secondly, as you guys can see, guard Caris Levert, U of M's own Caris Levert, has agreed to a 2-year, $29 million deal with the Pistons. So those are the two signings the Pistons have made so far. And let's start with B-Ball Paul, right? A fan favorite with many Detroit Pistons fans because of how he plays, because of the effort that he gives, and the motor that he always provides, right? It's hard not to like a player like him because he does what he can on the basketball court, and he never takes plays off. He always plays hard, and that does fit the Detroit Pistons style of play. So I'm not necessarily mad at this signing. I do think the Pistons may have tried to go a different direction if guys like Naz Reid or Santi Aldama were available, because those are some hot names that were being tossed around with regards to the Pistons. You guys know Naz Reid was number one on my list, and when he signed back with the Timberwolves, that was a big blow for me. But, you know, guys like Santi Aldama were also decent options, but now he has resigned with the Memphis Grizzlies, right? And that happened pretty quickly when free agency started. I think about 10-15 minutes into free agency, they made sure they locked him up. So that was off the table. So I think moves like that are what may have moved the Pistons to go ahead and just bring back B-Ball Paul. And it's a reasonable deal. You know, 2 years, $11 million, $5.5 million a season. Last year, he made 1.5. So it is a bump up, but I still don't think that's a bad contract. You know, for 2 years, it's not really hampering you. And I don't know if the Pistons are still going to decide to make another move. I don't know if this is more so of a security blanket just to have another big if you need him. But I still feel like the Pistons may need another third big to upgrade what they had last year, because we all know last year, especially in the playoffs, when Isaiah Stewart was not available, guys like Cat, you know, guys like Mitchell Robinson were eating on the glass. They were dominating on the boards, and not even just from a numbers perspective, but just as far as when it happened, right? Late in games, the Pistons just couldn't grab a rebound, right? So I think having another big potentially to go along with a guy like Paul Reed would be helpful. I don't know if that's the Pistons' plan. I think the Pistons for now just wanted to secure him and bring him back. But I'm not mad at it. I just hope the Pistons aren't done yet when it comes to their bigs, because I still think they need to upgrade in that department for sure. Okay, moving on to the other signing, Caris Levert. So Caris Levert has agreed to a 2-year, $29 million deal with the Pistons. So just taking a look at some of his numbers, we all know that Caris Levert is a very talented player, right? That's never really been the issue. He's very talented. He's always had the ability to be able to score the basketball, right? So I think that is a positive, you know, especially with the Pistons, you know, kind of lacking scoring right now and needing some scoring punch with guys like Malik Beasley, unfortunately, being under investigation for, you know, gambling and things like that. We're not going to get into that right now, but we all know the situation with Malik Beasley, right? So I think because of that, that's why the Pistons were starting to look around and see what else may be available, because they can't wait, right? They can't wait, especially with free agency just now taking effect. They couldn't wait and sit around and let all these free agents just get scooped up while they just wait, especially when they don't know how long this is going to drag out. So I understand the move. It hurts because, you know, there were a few guys the Pistons were looking at to try to fill some of that void, because I don't think anybody out there was going to fully fill the void that a guy like Malik Beasley left in his absence, because he was just so important to this team last year, and he had the kind of year that I don't think anybody expected to have, as far as what he was able to bring on and off the court with his shooting, with his efficiency, with his consistency. Just everything that he did last year was great. We know he didn't play great in the playoffs, but that's another story. Overall, he had a really, really good season. So I don't think there was one guy out there that you could point to say, yeah, he can fill this void. I think there were a collective of guys like, for example, Alexander Walker, that many were looking at, and unfortunately he is also off the table. He signed with the Hawks for 4 years, $62 million. So I don't know if Trajan Langdon already knew he wasn't going to be available, but that was reported after the Pistons had signed Caris Levert to his 2-year, $29 million contract, which is the mid-level exception that they gave him. They gave him the full mid-level exception. So we got to wait and see what happens at this point. We got to wait and see. But my issue with Caris Levert, as we mentioned, is not even that, as far as being able to totally fill the void that was left by Malik Beasley. That's part of it. But the other part of it for me is just availability. He has not really been healthy for most of his career. I took a look at his numbers here. Let's go back a few seasons. This year, he played 26 games. Last year, 38 games. Then 64, then 68, then 74. That was a good stretch. But then 19, 39, 58, 35, 12, 47, 45, 40, 71, 57. That is actually his entire career that I just rattled off. So one thing about the Pistons last season is that they, for the most part, were healthy. They had guys who were willing and wanted to play, right? We know that at the end of the season, Isaiah Stewart went down, unfortunately. We know that mid-season, Jaden Ivey went down with his freak injury, with his leg injury, and had him out for the rest of the season. So we understand that. But those were, at least in the case of Jaden, that was more so a freak injury, right? Not something that should be recurring or anything like that. So outside of those two, the Pistons had a lot of health. They were not really bitten by the injury bug until late in the season. So I think it's going to be very important for the Pistons to add guys to this team who are going to be available. And that's the only thing with Caris Levert that kind of scares me a little bit, is how much is he going to be available if he's going to be here. It's not a really hefty contract, but you still want guys that are going to be available. And especially with guys like Malik Beasley not being available, you're going to need guys who can step into their role and try to just fill some of that void, bring some scoring. And I do think he can do that. But the question, once again, is how much is he going to be available? So that's my only issue. I know sometimes fans, not even just Pistons fans, but fans in general, when they get an injury-plagued player that comes to their team, they have this expectation that because since they're on their team now, they're going to revert back to their prime version. And that it just doesn't work that way. It just does not work that way. And I think the Pistons still have some work to do. But with Caris Levert, last season he averaged about 15 points a game. He averaged 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover, half a block in about 26 minutes a game. So I think that 26-minute mark is doable. I think Malik played around 30 minutes a game last season. But once again, you're not looking for one guy to fill the void that was left by Malik Beasley. So I do think that he can come in and help, right? The only issue is just his health. If he can remain healthy, I think he can be a help to this team, give this team some scoring punch. But it's still, like I mentioned, the Pistons still have work to do with this roster. I don't think this is enough for them to advance much further than they did last year. Now, we know we're getting guys back like Isaiah Stewart and Jaden Ivey, but I still think the Pistons could have upgraded a little bit more, especially in the front court with that third big, or maybe even the second big with the stretch 4 spot, whether you want to have somebody who can start at the 4 or you want to have somebody come behind Tobias as the backup 4, right? I think that was the biggest need this offseason. But then once the Malik Beasley thing happened, now it's like we have 2 needs that need to be addressed, right? So I really think the Pistons have more work to do. I think that Trajan Langdon was caught off guard by the Malik Beasley situation. And I think that's why we saw him pivoting to guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Caris Levert. And we've also heard names like Luke Kennard. So, or even Duncan Robinson, right? We've heard all these names. And once again, these are guys who you're looking for to come and be a 6th man type of player, right? We know Luke Kennard is not a defender, right? When he was here the first time, he was not a defender, but he's a very good 3-point shooter. And I think having guys like Cade and Jaden who can facilitate and get him the ball would get him good shots. But once again, he also has dealt with injuries. He's also been injury prone, and he's not even that old of a player, but he's got bad knees, and he's been dealing with this for a few years now. So once again, the injury bug, how much are you going to be available? Those are things that I'm looking at. Duncan Robinson, I think he actually declined his $20 million a year option for next season with the Heat. So I don't know if that's really an option anymore. I think Caris Levert was probably the answer, at least for now, for what the Pistons want to do. I didn't think the Duncan Robinson thing would actually happen, because if he's declining $20 million, you know, the Pistons were in agreement with Malik Beasley for about $14 million a year, 3 years, $42 million, right? So $14 million a year was what they were looking at, which may have been the mid-level exception they planned to give him. But if Duncan Robinson is asking for 20 plus million, if he's already declining his $20 million option already, you know, that probably means he's going to want more. And I don't think the Pistons should be giving a guy like him, who's not an elite defender, who's really just a good shooter. You can't give him that much money if you're intending to still improve your roster, particularly in the front court. So I think this may be it for now. I don't really know what else the Pistons may do. It's not a lot of guys out there really available, but maybe now we just kind of transition and pivot to the trade market, because there are some guys on this roster who could still be moved, right? So we got to wait and see. There's still some flexibility with that. There are a few guys that come to mind that could potentially be moved in a trade. So I don't think this is the end. This is really just the beginning. Free agency just started, and I want to keep that in mind and encourage everybody else to keep that in mind. It just got started. You know, it's kind of hard sometimes to remain patient and calm when you see names flying off the board, right? But there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? We can get guys in the trade market as well as free agency. It doesn't always have to be done only via free agency. So we got to wait and see what happens. But that is the news, guys. To recap, the Pistons have added Paul Reed back to their roster on a 2-year, $11 million deal to return. And they have also added guard Caris Levert to a 2-year, $29 million deal, about $14.5 million per season, which is the mid-level exception. So now we will wait. We have to wait and see what happens going forward, and we'll get more information on these guys to potentially see what their role might be for this team. So I will tap back in with you guys when I have more information on these guys and anything else that happens, which very well could. I'll be right back here for you guys. Make sure you guys tap in. And as always, man, Detroit versus everybody. Peace.
All the dirty work, all dog. I'ma dive on the floor, go try to block every shot, and I'ma be physical with you the whole game. You know Stu gonna be physical with you. When you think of the Pistons, you think just hard work and just gritty basketball. That's just the identity you gotta have when you put on that jersey.
I'm not your average breed of Kennard. Not a good dog, I'm bad boy for life. I set the tone, don't care about no tick. Let it be known, I get my respect. Come in the lane and see I don't bluff. If you retaliate, that's on ya. Slick talking pundits, I hear your shade. Talking that shop, you must run this way every day. Tryna tell ya, put the dog palm, mess around, find out, yeah. Tryna tell ya, put the dog palm, mess around, find out, yeah. For some barbecue sauce, boy, you better crop a hill, cause I'm like that. When you're ready for some barbecue sauce, boy, you better crop a hill, cause I'm like that.